Morning. Over the peak, I thought I'd put together a Euro 5 just to round off this Euro thing, seeing the... That's better. Seeing they've finished their meeting and have decided what to do with things, and they're all very happy. The greatest thing that's happened, I think, that the Euro project moves ahead one more to closer integration, which makes the Euro politicians happy. And I'm still I'm at a loss to know why they actually want all this Euro integration, United States of Euroland. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me, but that's what they've been pushing for 40 years. So the wagon moves on, but really on a financial sort of footing, it's been a lot of fudging. I've just taken some snips from the newspapers this morning. I'm not going to go heavy into the details of it because I haven't read what the really heavy dudes say about it. But I think it's pretty obvious what's gone on. The overall presentation has been that everyone has had to give an awful lot to get this agreement. But from what I can see, an awful lot has been given all round. And if there's a loser, it's Germany. But I'm not sure how Germany loses, because Germany doesn't really lose, because Germany absolutely had to give to receive in this Euro thing, and Germany is going to be certainly the biggest giver from this agreement. So the first one I've got up, I haven't put them in any order, so because I don't think they can be put in a particular order to make it wonderfully full of sense, but we'll get a good idea by the end of this video what's come to pass. The agreement refers to a European Marshall Plan to restore competitiveness to Greece. Now this is extra to the money things that I'll come on to later. The Marshall Plan will, I think, involve more money from Central Europe, Brussels money, going to Greece again, like it did at the beginning, to try and get them into the 21st century. There'll be more money going into Greece to try and give them growth. But with that money will go a lot of advisors to try and get the Greeks to do the right thing. But I would think this money's going in there. It will be money, I'm sure it will be money going in there to make it look in the first couple of years as though what they're doing is working. In other words, the European money will go in there, which will give for the appearance of growth and show that everything's working and everything was a good idea. European Central Bank must also drop its opposition to any kind of default. This is okay. This was a bit of a loss to the European Central Bank. They don't seem to have gained anything. Trichet said that he wouldn't accept defaulted bonds, but he's been told to accept them, and he's accepted what he's been told. Greece, Ireland and Portugal, all essentially insolvent. Yes, probably. Can be promised a lowly interest rate on their EFSF loans of 3.5%. So I'm still not sure whether Ireland and Portugal are going to get their terms pushed out into the future as well. Let's say they will, it doesn't really matter, but they're going to get lower interest rates, 3.5%. Ireland might have to give on the corporate tax, but again, that's just round the edges stuff. So what they're doing basically is the lender saying, look, it looks like this lot are going to default. The only way that we can get any money out of them is to say that we'll take the money in dribs and drabs over the years and we'll accept a lower interest rate. This finishes, and it brings a very big point in that I could go on for quite a long time, but hopefully I won't. Then logically Spain and Italy must be able to access the same favourable terms. What's happening here is it's all very fine, this Greece, Portugal and Ireland thing, but Spain and Italy will run into trouble if there isn't a great amount of growth in the world economy over the next 3 years, let's say. especially, their economies will need pulling out of the mire, and the only way they're going to get pulled out is if there's a real flourishing in the world economy. Otherwise, without that growth, Italy and Spain are going to struggle with their debt burdens. Now, they are contributing to this EFSF thing. And this EFSF thing is the thing that is lending money over a long period of time at low interest rate to Greece, Portugal and Ireland. So we could say, although it's not really the right way of saying it, that Italy and Spain have got to borrow money at, let's say, 5.5% to give that money to the EFSF, so they give it to Greece, Ireland and Spain at 3.5%. And it's a real head scratcher. And what's happened is that has obviously come up in conversation. So the EFSF is now allowed to go out in the bond market, secondary bond market, and buy, for example, Italian and Spanish bonds. The idea being to drive down the rate of the Spanish bonds so they don't have to, they've both been through 6 this week. So to get them down through 5.5, down through 5, and hopefully down towards the 3.5 that Ireland, Spain and Greece have. But as Bernanke's found, it takes huge quantities of money to drive down interest rates. But again, the Euro politicians will be delighted by this. I'm sure what their idea will be, well, we'll spend all the EFSF funds doing all these noble things that they've been told to do. And then we'll go, well, we're empty now, we need to be topped up again. And the idea is then that when that's topped up, they'll try and have it topped up regularly. And then that will be the regular fund for, it's like the European IMF type fund, but they'll be only too delighted to go spending the EFSF fund in the open market or wherever and whenever, so they can empty the fund, so then they can demand that it's refilled again, because after all, the people paid in the first lot, well, surely they'll pay in the second lot, and they probably will. That's enough for that one. As part of the deal, Greece will also receive another bailout package from Europe, the International Monetary Fund and the private sector, worth 160 billion. The first bailout was 110 billion. There's a certain amount, so yeah, 110 and now 160. And then that's all spread out over in the future at the low interest rate. And there's a few defaults going in there. I'm not sure yet this morning how these defaults are being done, but there's a certain amount of defaulting being done as well, which is meant to cut the amount of loans given by a quarter. I'm not sure how that's being managed. Experts describe the deal as a significant step towards financial integration in Europe. In a way it is, if they can get this EFSF thing to be regularly given to by the countries, all the countries, and they dole that money out, that can develop into a Central European treasury. But, of course, all the parliaments of all the countries are going to have to sign off on this. And I think they're going to have trouble with that. But then these are politicians that seem to do whatever they want to do. And the people don't know about it. They don't understand it. They don't care about it. So it could well go through. Could it? I would have thought there'll be trouble in Germany. But Germany has realised via Merkel here that if they stand back from this, they ultimately get hurt by this. So they must, little by little, are being eaten away at to go along with the great big project. And ultimately, yes, they will end up paying for most of it. In the draft agreement, the 17 leaders agreed that all other, this is comical, it's actually written in there, all other Euro countries solemnly reaffirm their inflexible determination not to default. Isn't that childish? while pledging that member states will provide backstops to banks as appropriate. That had to go in there as well, didn't it? The bankers had to get there. It's not the bankers really, it's the governments of France and Germany in this occasion, saying, look, we know that we're going to have to bail the banks out, and we reaffirm that each country will take care of its own banks. All banks will be taken care of. Last one, there's lots and lots to go into of this, but this is quite enough from me for this morning, isn't it, really? For the future, the leaders said they would commit to introduce legally binding national fiscal frameworks as foreseen in the Fiscal Frameworks Directive by the end of 2012. Commit to introduce legally binding national fiscal frameworks. This is a tricky one. From what I understand, it's different things to different people, but it's trying to throw back onto the old Maastricht, get your budgets under control. But the real reasoning behind this is they're wanting to start the national budgets being presented to the central, what would be the central treasury, to write them, to sign off on. That won't be agreed on this particular line of agreements, but that's what they want to move towards, that the central, whoever, we'll call it Brussels, tells the national governments whether their budgets are acceptable or not. It's commit to introduce legally binding national fiscal frameworks. So don't run too much debt, etc., etc. But it is pushing those budgets towards being signed off on by Brussels. They will also press ahead with a single European credit rating agency. So that's the last thing I'm going to quote. A single European credit rating agency. The word single in there absolutely rings alarm bells for me. And is it funny or is it sad? What is it? You know, a single European credit rating agency that is being pushed forward by these European politicians. A single European credit rating agency. That, in a way, that kind of sums things up. I won't explain it. I'll just say it one more time. And if it doesn't mean anything to you, none of this will have meant anything to you, that the politicians are going to press ahead with setting up a single European credit rating agency. One thing I will say, though, most all of the debts in Europe are still written on bits of paper. They've not changed at all, and they still need paying back. Weekend.